Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain speaking, Debbie Buyaki. Welcome aboard. Today we'll be taking a flight over nature's view, a 2030 climate journey story. Kicking off from Nairobi, making a stop at introductions, and finally landing at freshwater issues. I hope you enjoy this climate journey story. Seatbelts on and wheels up. Dear passengers, just as we did in our previous seasons, I'd give a brief overview of what the season would look like, just so you're in the know. So this episode will feature a bit of the introduction as well as the matter of interest. And as much as they made the two previous seasons independent, I think that was the word I was looking for. This season, more or less, is going to be interdependent. Like, you will not quite understand what episode 3 talks about if you haven't listened to 1 or 2. Anyways, as of September last year, that's 2022, I was living my life and chilling. And I got fronted this program with the National Geographic and the Nature Conservancy through Paragon 1, of course. A program on research, freshwater research and community issues. And I know maybe over 4,000 people wanted in on it. And, well, a few got picked and I was among the ones that got picked. So that's something I'm really grateful for, because for sure, it has pushed me beyond limits looking forward, because this is a few months into it, and it has pushed me beyond my usual, let me not say comfort zone, I think even working zones, because I have not at all done anything freshwater or outside my usual field of climate change, which is trees. So this was something new and beneficial, exactly why I'm actually doing this podcast. It was as an idea developed during this research. Anyway, I also got to meet and exchange ideas with a handful of individuals from across the world, and I learned about freshwater issues in their communities. And at the end of it, of course, we were tasked to come up with solutions of what problems we have discovered in our communities. It was interesting to see most of the people did their research along the rivers they grew up around or in their home areas, which are fresh and are currently facing pollution, or there's some species of frogs that are disappearing. You know, it was interesting. This has been like a roller coaster ride I have not had in any time before that. Anyway. For me, I made a shocking, well, at least I think it's shocking, discovery in Africa, especially because I've mentioned it. I had no idea about freshwater and community issues in my country or in the world generally. I didn't just quite know or care about it. I think also it's because there was plenty of water where I have been for a few years. So it's never quite an issue to think about water in that sense. But this opened my eyes. Anyway, this season, therefore, is about my research, my discovery, and my usual take-home action. After I have discovered all this, what do I do in regards to all this information? Action is really a big part of me, I think. So these episodes are going to be kind of interdependent, and it will cover the research in the research topics and the action point of the whole idea. That being said, let's dive into the topic of this episode, freshwater and climate change. This is me trying to relate what I am learning. I was learning during the research. The research is still going on up to now. And what I have always done, climate change issues. Okay, as custom, let's start with the statistics and let me blow your mind. Most of the world's fresh water is not easily accessible to humans. Approximately 69% of Earth's fresh water is located away in form of ice and glaciers and polar ice caps and all that. So that's most of the fresh water on Earth is in form of ice, and it can't quite be accessible to everyone. Then coming down a bit, other than the other 30%, this is 69%, the other 30% of Earth's fresh water is under surface in form of groundwater. And I want you to remember this statement, groundwater, because it will be a big part of this season. For human use, therefore, there's only 1% of Earth's fresh water readily available. Can you imagine, like, we're coming down from 69% to 30%, and now just 1% is available for human use? Is it even possible that we're alive in regards to what do you mean we only survive on 1% of Earth's fresh water and we need fresh water, which is as well regarded as the usable water for food, drinking, other stuff, daily life issues. What do you mean, honestly, we only survive on 1%? This reminds me of season 1, episode 7, when we talk about food production. And we found out 70% of the world's population is actually fed by 30% of the world's resources, that's being water and agricultural land. And it's only 30% that actually feeds over 70% of this planet. And now I'm finding out that 1% of fresh water is available for human use. This is, honestly, we're alive by miracles. But let's go on with some more statistics. Brazil, Russia, Canada, Indonesia, China, Colombia, and the US have most of the world's surface freshwater resources. That being, the rivers and the lakes that are fresh. And these are more of to the west. Okay, of where I am, to the west, and one country in the east. So what happens to the rest of us, Europe and Africa? Where do we get our fresh water if most of the surface fresh water is located in areas not here? Anyway, this means that approximately a fifth of the world's population lives in water-scarce areas. An average person receiving less than 1,000 cubic millimeters of water per year. Let me explain that a bit. A fifth of the world's population lives in water-scarce areas. So that goes into billions and billions of people without water. And when I'm talking about water here, I hope you, as we move forward, you remember I'm talking about fresh water because that's the usable water. There's a whole topic on salty water and desalinization and how we can capitalize on that, but that's coming up in the next episode. So basically, it's just we're not good when it comes to water and how scarce it is, and also how we use it in relation to how less it's around. For example, it takes 600 liters to produce 1 liter of milk. Another mind-blowing fact, I found out 7,600 liters of water to make 1 pair of jeans. Is that even... Well, honestly, why are we wearing jeans if it takes this much water to just make 1 pair, and considering that thousands? I actually saw something recently that as of now, 2023, we have clothes in this planet that can last us for 600, for 6 more generations. That's like hundreds of years. We already have enough clothes. So why are we making more jeans with this? If it takes this, I think it's preposterous amount of water. Anyways, solving climate change is not only about emissions, but it's also about solving water issues. This also being discussed in the World Economic Forum last year, and it was a big topic, honestly. Freshwater was a big topic then, and we need to agree how we will be using water. And not only that, pricing water, but I will talk about this maybe going towards the end. The price we have put on water is something that is also making it be devalued because it's also there and it's cheap, and we can just use it as we want. But solving water issues is something that we need to talk about as a planet, because water is more or less like the backbone when it comes to climate change, because it doesn't make sense how much water per industry we are wasting for beauty products or for food products, yet we have alternatives that we can use going forward, considering we just have 1%. Anyway, with increasing temperature, surface water is rapidly decreasing. Surface water meaning like lakes and water bodies, rivers, stuff like that have fresh water. With increasing temperature, this is because of climate change, of course. The surface water is decreasing rapidly. And on the other hand, we're having population increase. We're into billions of people now. Is it 8 billion people today? So if there will be no water for them to use even in the next few years, what are we going to do? Honestly, we need to talk about water with its seriousness. And this is something I found out during the research I was conducting during this time. The fight against climate change will be felt through water, and more so fresh water. If there's no water, we'll all talk about that. Climate change. If it's not raining, if the lakes are drying, we all blame climate change. So the fight against climate change will be felt through water. Water is life. And what happens in its absence, For example, now it's 2023, and in South Africa, there's a huge water scarcity problem, and it's being accredited to climate change. So more or less, climate change will be felt through the lack of water. And that's the main interlinkage in regards to the topic of this episode. So let me try to break it down a bit further. with an example. I want the children also listening to this podcast to understand as well the nitty gritties when it comes to freshwater issues. By the way, this is going to be more of like a complex ish season because I'm going to be talking about stuff that even goes into geography, which I was really shocked. But I'll break it down so everyone of every age can understand what I'm talking about. So, country X, big dream, big vision to make a great civilization with good jobs for its people, plenty of work, a great GDP each financial year, good education, healthcare system, good roads, developed cities, citizens who can afford this lifestyle, and so on. This is just, the big dream of every country, more or less. So what do? They invest in industry, right? I think industry is the biggest like producer of money and stuff like that. I think China has discovered that early enough and they're leading in terms of GDP and wealth status. Anyway, this is a secret I'm stealing to some governments. Invest in industry. And, industry will kill all birds with one stone. So they'll have employment, they'll have money, they'll have good roads, hospitals, schools. Money will be in circulation going forward. However, without proper management and regard to the environment, it leaves the environment to pay. By the way, this is a whole debate that I've had before. Maybe I still have in my head. Do you think the economy and the environment can coexist in a healthy way? For example, I don't even think there's an example. Do you think they can coexist? Because in most cases, for one to thrive, the other must pay. And this is something I'd also like to hear your thoughts on. Do you think environment and economy can coexist in one state, I don't know, in a peaceful state, in a balanced state? Because moving forward, these are conversations that we'll have if we want to be alive because of money or we want to be alive because we can't be alive in this environment and planet at that time. One will have to subdue for sure at the end of the day, because unless something comes up or we try to navigate ways to work the both of them to exist, economy and environment, they quite don't balance each other out. Anyway, back to my story. With all these industries around, these, waste products being released, waste being industrial waste, which can be chemical, liquid, solids, or gaseous waste. So in this country X, the average temperature starts increasing, and as a result, there's less precipitation. Precipitation, kids, is rain. So there's less rain because the temperatures are now increasing. So if there's no rain, where do we get fresh water? We start pointing fingers and blaming climate change because there's no drinking water, there's no household water, industrial water as well, and so on. So climate change for real would be felt through the lack of water in this country. But in this sense, maybe I've opened a wormhole. Is it really climate change or human activity that eventually leads to water scarcity? And climate change and water scarcity and the effects that come out of that. So is it really climate change that we're always pointing fingers? Oh, we blame climate change, there's no rain. Or is it just basically the one looking at the mirror? Is it human activity that is the initiator of all this? Anyway. Water scarcity, as we know, holds everything. Its absence is the absence of life. Its scarcity results to food insecurity. In my country, for example, we have irrigation that is mainly rain-fed. So we have like planting seasons in relation to the seasons of rain. I don't know if that's something that makes sense. Maybe some other people just have, summer, autumn, winter, spring, but we have like dry season, rainy season, dry season, and then cold season, something like that. So our irrigation and food security really is determined by the fact that there's rain or there's no rain. So in the past 3 years, we have been having a horrible drought that we've seen it being called the worst in like 50 years. So what happened to us and our food? What have we been eating? You guys, we've been starving. But listen, food insecurity, vulnerability to natural disasters, political instability, rising corruption, basically most of the things we discussed in season 1, all of these issues, of course, are kind of a result of climate change, and climate change also being seen through the water scarcity front. And all these issues also affecting poor and vulnerable communities the worst, considering also they didn't quite contribute to all this. So My conclusion is when we talk about climate change and water, water is like the biggest symptom. Let me call it that now. Biggest symptom of climate change. If there's no water, meaning there's no fresh water, that is. There's no rain. And why is there no rain? Because temperatures are high. And why are the temperatures high? Because we've destroyed the ozone and stuff like that. Or the sea is too salty. You know, I will talk about salty water and climate change in the next episode. But basically, that's the conclusion of how the two are interlinked. So in this sense, water is placed above all these issues. Nature, biodiversity, food crisis, and all that all fall under one bracket. And what closes this bracket is water. There can't be nature to that extent or biodiversity without water. Honestly, water is life. And I hope you see that it's not only for human beings and animals, but also biodiversity in nature that goes like into creatures out there. They also depend on water, and without water, they also can't survive. Did you see the giraffes and wild animals that have been dying in my country? It's something that was, I think, featured as well in UN biodiversity when the drought was too bad. All the animals are dying, including wild animals. So water for sure is what closes all this bracket of nature and biodiversity. So climate change needs to be fought more on the waterfront. It will like effortlessly be solved by it. But maybe we could talk about this in the end. So if we want to solve climate change to some extent, we also need to solve our water crisis. And water crisis makes us look back into what is a trigger to the lack of water in itself. So I hope you have understood what I was talking about. In conclusion, water is the mother fixer or the father destroyer of climate change. If we have water flowing through forests and making rivers and rivers coming into cities and municipal counties, providing water to communities downstream, we have life. And if we have the lack of it, we will for sure face climate change in a more horrible or more severe manner. We'll feel the effects of climate change worse if we can't even have water while we're at it. So I'd like to finish with two quotes that would bring this all into perspective. One of the quotes is by some amazing lady I think I kind of work under in Stop Ecocide International. She's called Jojo Meta. She's the co-founder. We're talking about water, I think, during the UN Water Conference earlier this year, 2023. And there's a statement she made. Water is the lifeblood of the earth. And just like our planet, we too are made up of it. Humans are water, and water is life. I hope you've understood the essence of water being life. And that's a particular statement because I will ask you to remember it going forward, maybe in episode 3 or moving forward, because that's when we start talking about the research in depth. So keep that in mind. Water is life. Quote number 2, this is by Dr. Alain Gachet. He's a huge core of my research, by the way, if I may steal that for you. And you'll get to hear more about him in a few episodes. But here's what he said. If there's no water, there's no civilization. And I'd like you to think about that deeply because honestly, if there is no water, what are we going to do as a civilization? And that's what I would like you to think about as a call to action in regards to water. I think I asked you to engage on the question on economy versus environment. And now I'd like to add on economy versus environment versus water. Does that make sense? Maybe we'll see what discussions you will come up with. But hey, thank you for taking this flight with me as usual. I'll see you on the next flight and I hope to hear from you going forward. All this for Earth.